John was a man who had served his country with pride and honor. For years, he had worn the uniform of the military, facing challenges that many people could never imagine. When he returned home after years of sacrifice and hard work, all he wanted was a peaceful life. He loved his family, his small hometown, and his old car, which he had carefully restored and taken great pride in. That car wasn't just a vehicle to John. It was a symbol of everything he had worked for: freedom, hard work, and respect. One quiet evening, after a long day at work, John parked his car in his driveway. It was an ordinary night, calm and peaceful. He waved goodbye to his neighbor as he went inside his house. He never expected that when he woke up the next morning, everything would have changed. Early the next day, as the sun was just rising, John stepped outside with a cup of coffee in his hand, ready to start the day. But as soon as he saw his car, his heart sank. The car was covered in ugly, hateful graffiti. The words painted on the side were cruel, full of disrespect for John and everything he stood for. The windows were smashed and the tires were slashed. It was clear that this wasn't a simple prank. It was an act of vandalism meant to hurt and humiliate. John stood frozen for a moment, staring at the destruction. He felt a wave of emotions: shock, anger, sadness. The car, which he had spent so much time fixing and polishing, now looked like a broken mess. But the hateful messages painted on it cut even deeper than the physical damage. They were aimed at him, at his service, and at his very identity as a veteran. The news about the vandalism spread quickly through the neighborhood. People came out of their homes, whispering in disbelief. Many knew John and respected him for his service. They couldn't believe someone would do such a terrible thing to him. The community was shaken, and many wanted to help. But who had done this? It was soon clear that a local group, known for their careless and entitled behavior, was responsible. This group had a reputation for causing trouble, acting without respect for others, and feeling like they were above the rules. Their reckless actions had hurt many people before, but this was the first time they had targeted someone like John, a respected veteran. John's neighbors told him they had seen some of the group hanging around late at night, making noise and acting aggressively. But no one had expected them to go this far. The group seemed to think they could do anything without consequences, and this act of vandalism was a cruel example of that attitude. Despite the pain and anger, John refused to be broken. He was determined to find justice, not just for himself, but to send a message that such behavior would not be tolerated. John contacted the police and reported the crime, hoping that the authorities would take it seriously. He also began talking to his neighbors and friends, gathering support and urging them to stand together against this injustice. Many people in the community were inspired by John's strength. They helped clean up the mess, offering their time and resources to repair the damage to his car and home. Local businesses donated materials, and neighbors volunteered to help repaint the car and fix the windows. It became more than just about John's car. It became about standing up for what is right and protecting the values the community shared. John's story also caught the attention of local news. Reporters came to interview him, sharing his story with a wider audience. People from nearby towns and cities reached out with messages of support, grateful to see someone standing strong in the face of cruelty. The hateful group was no longer able to hide behind their careless behavior. The community was watching, and they were ready to hold them accountable. Even though John was deeply hurt by what happened, he found comfort in the kindness of those around him. He realized that the true strength was not just in the uniform he once wore, but in the people who stood beside him now. The experience made him more determined than ever to fight for justice, not only for himself, but for anyone who might face similar hatred. In the days following the vandalism, John worked closely with the police. He shared everything he knew, hoping to help identify the vandals. The police started investigating, collecting evidence, and talking to witnesses. John's story was no longer just about a damaged car. It was about standing up to a group that thought they could bully and disrespect others without consequence. As the investigation continued, John's spirit grew stronger. He knew this was not just about revenge, but about making his community safer and teaching the entitled group a lesson they would never forget. He wanted to show that respect and honor still mattered, and that those who tried to tear others down would face justice. John's car, though damaged, became a symbol. It was a reminder of the struggle between right and wrong, of pain and healing. Every scratch and broken window told a story, but so did every hand that reached out to help him repair it. The car was no longer just a possession. It was a testament to resilience, courage, and the power of community. Though the night of the vandalism had been dark and painful, John's story was far from over. It was only the beginning of a fight for justice, for respect, and for the values that he had served to protect. And as the sun rose each day, John stood ready to face whatever came next with the same strength and determination that had carried him through his years of service. Certainly, after the terrible incident where John's car was vandalized, news spread quickly through the small town. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and stories, and hearing about such a hateful act shocked people deeply. John had always been a respected figure in the community, a man who had served his country bravely and returned home with nothing but kindness to offer. So when his car was destroyed in such a cruel way, the whole town felt like they had been hurt too. Almost immediately, neighbors began to come together. They didn't want John to feel alone in this difficult time. Word traveled fast from house to house, and soon people were gathering on porches and sidewalks, sharing what they had seen and discussing what could be done. Everyone agreed that what happened to John was wrong, and it was a sign that something had to change. Some neighbors went beyond just words. They started organizing meetings to figure out how to support John and prevent this kind of thing from happening again. There were discussions about neighborhood watch groups, community patrols, and ways to increase security. The spirit of helping and protecting one another grew stronger. It was as if the vandalism had united the community in a new and powerful way. At the same time, many people began to speak up publicly in support of John. On social media, messages poured in. Friends, family, and even strangers shared their outrage and sympathy. They posted pictures of John's damaged car, along with words of encouragement and respect for his service. Some started hashtags calling for justice, hoping that the wider world would take notice and put pressure on the authorities to act quickly. Local news stations caught on to the story, sending reporters to interview John and members of the community. John spoke openly about how hurt he was, but also how determined he was not to let hatred win. His calm and honest words touched many people, reminding them that veterans like him had sacrificed a lot for everyone's freedom. The story resonated beyond just the town. It sparked conversations about respect, honor, and standing up against bullying wherever it happens. Meanwhile, the entitled group responsible for the vandalism reacted very differently. Instead of showing remorse or understanding the pain they had caused, some of them began to mock John openly. They made jokes on social media, calling him names and making fun of his military service. Their behavior only made the community angrier and more determined to stand behind John. The group's arrogance and disrespect were clear, but it also showed how far they were willing to go to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. Despite the group's attempts to dismiss the situation, the people around John refused to stay silent. Parents talked to their children about kindness and respect, making sure the younger generation understood why what happened was so wrong. Schools held discussions about bullying and the importance of standing up for others. Local leaders spoke at community events, condemning the vandalism and praising the town's unity in response. Some of John's closest friends took on the task of helping him repair the damage. They organized fundraisers to pay for fixing the car and replacing the broken windows. Volunteers offered their time and skills, helping to clean up the graffiti and restore the car to its former condition. It was a huge effort, but everyone was willing to pitch in. The car, once a symbol of pain, slowly started to become a symbol of hope and resilience. John himself was amazed and touched by the outpouring of support. It reminded him that even though there were people who wanted to spread hate, there were far more who wanted to spread kindness and justice. He began attending community meetings and events, not only to talk about his experience, but to encourage others to stand strong when facing challenges. His story inspired many, showing that courage isn't just about fighting on a battlefield, but also about standing up for what is right in everyday life. The local police department also felt the pressure from the community to take the case seriously. They increased patrols in the neighborhood and worked harder to gather evidence. The presence of so many watchful eyes made it harder for the entitled group to hide. People started sharing tips and information anonymously, hoping to help catch the vandals. The sense of unity between the community and the police grew, creating a safer environment for everyone. As the days passed, John noticed a change in the town's atmosphere. What had begun as fear and anger slowly turned into hope and action. People were more aware of each other, looking out for signs of trouble and ready to help. The incident sparked a new sense of pride in the community. A pride not just in their homes and streets, but in the values they wanted to protect. At the same time, John struggled with some difficult feelings. Even with so much support, the pain of the vandalism lingered. He found it hard to forget the hateful words painted on his car and the damage to something he loved. But every time he thought about giving up, he remembered the faces of his neighbors who stood with him, the messages from strangers who believed in justice, and the promise he had made to himself to keep fighting. John's family also played a big role in his recovery. They offered him comfort and reminded him of his strength. His children were proud of their father and helped him in small ways, like cleaning up the car or talking to neighbors. Their love and care were a powerful reminder that he was not alone. The story of John and his vandalized car soon became more than just a local news item. It was a lesson in resilience, community, and justice. It showed how even the darkest acts could bring light when people chose to stand together. And it reminded everyone that no matter how entitled or careless some people might be, the power of kindness and respect would always be stronger. After the community had come together to support John and expressed their anger at the vandalism, the next important step was the police investigation. John knew that words and support were important, but what really mattered now was finding the people responsible and making sure they faced the consequences of their actions. Justice had to be served, not only for him but for the whole community. The police arrived soon after John reported the crime. They were professional and took the case seriously, knowing how much this meant to John and everyone else. The first thing they did was to examine the crime scene carefully. They looked at the damage to the car, the paint used for the hateful messages, the broken glass, and the slashed tires. Every detail mattered because even the smallest clue could help catch the vandals. John stood nearby watching the police work. It was hard for him to see the car again after what had happened, but he understood that this was an important part of the process. He answered their questions, explaining when and where he had parked the car, and whether he had noticed anything unusual the night before. His answers were clear and honest. He also mentioned the group in the neighborhood that was known for troublemaking, hoping that might give the police a starting point. The police officers took photographs and collected physical evidence. They used gloves to handle everything carefully, so as not to damage any fingerprints or other important traces. They looked for tire tracks around the driveway and the street, trying to see if they could find where the vandals had come from or escaped to. They also checked the paint on the car to see if it matched any spray paint sold in nearby stores, which could help identify the vandals if they had bought the paint recently. Meanwhile, John helped the police by talking to neighbors who might have seen something. Some neighbors had noticed loud noises during the night, the sound of breaking glass and yelling, but hadn't thought much of it at first. After the vandalism was discovered, they started to remember small details. One neighbor said she had seen a group of teenagers hanging around the street late at night, acting strangely. Another mentioned a suspicious car parked nearby for a long time. The police followed up on these leads, visiting the houses and asking more questions. It was clear that the vandals were part of the entitled group that had been causing problems before. This group was known for making noise, breaking rules, and disrespecting others. The challenge was finding enough evidence to prove who exactly had done this. Then, something important happened. A young man in the neighborhood came forward with a video he had recorded on his phone. It wasn't meant to capture a crime. He had just been filming some friends joking around on the street. But when the police saw the video, they noticed that, in the background, the entitled group was near John's house late at night. Some of them were holding spray paint cans, and others were acting suspiciously around the driveway. This video became a key piece of evidence. The police analyzed it carefully, watching frame by frame. They could see faces clearly enough to identify some of the vandals. The video also showed the time the vandalism was happening, matching the reports from neighbors about the noise during the night. With this new evidence, the police started to build their case. They interviewed the young man who recorded the video and asked if he knew the people in the footage. He named a few members of the entitled group, confirming the police's suspicions. The authorities then began to question those individuals, asking about their whereabouts and what they had been doing. At first, the accused vandals denied everything. They said they had not been near John's house and claimed the video was unclear or taken out of context. But the police were patient and thorough. They collected more evidence, including fingerprints from the spray paint cans found nearby and paint residue on some of the suspects' clothes. They also found messages on social media where members of the group joked about the vandalism after it happened. The combination of physical evidence, eyewitness accounts, and video footage made the case strong. The police were able to connect the dots and prove that the entitled group had targeted John's car in a deliberate act of vandalism and disrespect. During this time, John felt a mix of emotions. He was relieved that progress was being made, but he also worried about how the accused would react. He hoped for justice, but didn't want more conflict or violence in the neighborhood. Still, he knew standing up for what was right sometimes meant facing difficult moments. The police continued their investigation by working closely with community members. They encouraged anyone who had seen or heard something suspicious to come forward. Some people who had been afraid to speak before now felt safer knowing that the police were serious and the community was united. This helped uncover even more details about the night of the vandalism. John also started to feel more empowered. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was an active part of the effort to bring justice. He spoke at community meetings, encouraging others to report crimes and support one another. His strength inspired many people, showing that courage could come from standing tall even after being hurt. The investigation lasted several weeks. The police carefully gathered all their evidence and prepared to take the case to court. They worked with prosecutors to ensure that the vandals would be held accountable in a way that was fair but firm. John trusted the system and hoped the legal process would send a message that crimes like this would not be ignored. As the investigation closed in on the vandals, the entitled group started to feel the pressure. Some members tried to apologize, quietly, hoping to avoid trouble. Others remained defiant, refusing to admit any guilt. But the evidence was clear, and the community's support for John was stronger than ever. The police's success in uncovering the truth showed how important it was for people to come forward and for communities to work together. Without the video from the young man and the cooperation of neighbors, the vandals might never have been caught. It was a reminder that even small actions, like recording a video or speaking up, could make a big difference. John's car, though still damaged, now carried a new meaning. It was not just a victim of violence, but a symbol of justice in progress. Every cracked window and painted word was a mark of a battle being fought, not with anger or revenge, but with truth and fairness. In the end, the investigation was more than just about catching criminals. It was about healing a community, standing up against hate, and proving that even when people try to tear others down, the power of justice and unity will always find a way. After the police had gathered enough evidence and identified the vandals responsible for damaging John's car, the next big moment arrived: the confrontation. This was the time when the entitled group would have to face the consequences of their actions, not only in the eyes of the law, but also before the whole community. The day was filled with a mix of tension, hope, and a strong desire for justice. John felt a mix of emotions as the court date approached. He was nervous because he knew this confrontation would be difficult. He wondered how the vandals would act. Would they show regret, or would they still act arrogantly? Despite his fears, John knew it was important to be there, not just for himself, but for the whole community who had supported him. He wanted to show that standing up against hate and disrespect was worth fighting for. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was full of people. Many neighbors came to show their support for John. Local veterans, friends, and even strangers who had followed the story attended. The room was quiet but filled with a strong sense of purpose. Everyone wanted to see justice done. The entitled group entered the courtroom with different attitudes. Some looked down, clearly uncomfortable and nervous. Others, however, tried to act tough and indifferent, as if they didn't care about what was happening. But the reality was that they were now facing serious consequences. The judge listened carefully as the prosecutor presented the evidence. The video footage, eyewitness statements, and forensic proof from the spray paint cans and fingerprints were laid out clearly. The court saw the damage done to John's car, the broken windows, slashed tires, and hateful messages that had been painted on. It was a powerful presentation, showing that this wasn't just an act of vandalism, but an attack on a respected member of the community. John watched quietly but with strength. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up calmly and told the court how the incident had affected him. He explained how much the car meant to him, not just as property but as a symbol of his service and sacrifice. He spoke about the pain of seeing hateful words and destruction aimed at him. But John also shared how the support from the community had helped him heal. His words moved many in the courtroom, showing the real human side of what had happened. The entitled group was then given a chance to speak. Some apologized sincerely, admitting they had made a terrible mistake. They expressed regret and asked for forgiveness, saying they hadn't understood the full impact of their actions. Others, however, remained defiant. They denied responsibility or blamed others, showing little remorse. This mix of reactions revealed the true challenge. While some were willing to learn and change, others still clung to their arrogance. The judge took all this into account when deciding the consequences. Because of the serious nature of the crime and the hate involved, the court ruled that the vandals would face legal penalties. They were ordered to pay fines and perform community service, including working on local projects to repair and improve public spaces. Additionally, some were required to attend counseling sessions aimed at teaching respect, responsibility, and the harm caused by their actions. The judgment sent a clear message. Vandalism and hateful acts would not be tolerated, and those who committed such crimes would be held accountable. The consequences were designed not just to punish, but also to educate, hoping to prevent future incidents. After the court session, John felt a sense of relief. Justice had been served, but more importantly, the process had been a step toward healing. The entitled group's behavior in court showed that change was possible even if it was difficult. Some members of the group later reached out privately to John, expressing genuine regret and asking how they could make amends. The community's response continued to be strong. The support didn't end with the court case. It grew stronger as people realized that standing up to hate was a long-term commitment. Local organizations began hosting workshops on respect and community building, and neighbors stayed more connected, watching out for each other. John's car, which had been a symbol of pain, slowly became a symbol of victory. The repairs were completed with help from volunteers and donations. When the car was finally restored, John took a moment to stand beside it, feeling proud not just of the car but of everything it represented: resilience, justice, and the power of community. The confrontation and court case taught important lessons. It showed that justice isn't always easy or fast, but it's necessary. It also proved that standing up for what's right can inspire others and bring people together. John's courage became a beacon of hope for anyone facing unfairness or hate. As the entitled group faced their consequences and the community moved forward, the story reminded everyone that respect and kindness must be chosen every day. When people come together to support one another and demand justice, even the darkest moments can lead to brighter futures. After the confrontation and the court's decision, life for John and the community began to change in many meaningful ways. The journey toward justice was not just about punishment, it was also about healing, learning, and growing stronger together. This part of the story is about how John, the entitled group, and the entire community moved forward, finding hope and rebuilding trust. John's life slowly started to return to normal, but he knew things were never quite the same. The damage to his car had been fixed, but the experience left a deep mark on his heart. What had hurt him most wasn't the broken glass or the paint. It was the disrespect and hate behind the vandalism. Still, John chose to focus on the positive. He saw how the people around him had come together, standing with him in a way that reminded him of the values he had fought for as a veteran. The court's ruling was firm, but fair. The vandals were required to pay fines and complete community service. More importantly, they had to take part in counseling and education programs. These programs were designed to help them understand the impact of their actions, to see the pain they caused, not just physically but emotionally, to John and the community. For some of the vandals, this was the first time they truly faced the consequences of their behavior and learned the importance of respect and responsibility. John was surprised when a few members of the entitled group reached out to him. At first, he was hesitant. After everything that happened, it was hard to trust them. But he realized that forgiveness was part of healing. He met with some of them to talk, to listen, and to share his story more deeply. These meetings were difficult, but meaningful. They helped break down walls of anger and misunderstanding. The vandals who showed genuine remorse worked hard to make amends. They helped clean up the neighborhood, fixed broken fences, and even volunteered to assist veterans organizations. Their efforts were small steps toward earning back trust and proving that change was possible. This part of the story showed that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about growth and making things right. The community also played a big role in healing. After the court case, neighbors continued to check in on John and each other. They organized more neighborhood events, barbecues, cleanup days, and fundraisers to build stronger bonds and show that hate had no place in their town. Schools held special programs to teach children about respect, kindness, and standing up against bullying. These efforts created a safer and more welcoming environment for everyone. John became a symbol of resilience and hope. He spoke at schools and community centers, sharing his experiences and encouraging people to stand up against injustice in peaceful and positive ways. His story inspired many to believe that courage comes not just from physical strength, but from standing up for what is right, even when it is hard. At home, John's family found comfort in the community's support. His children were proud of their father and learned valuable lessons about kindness and bravery. Together, they celebrated the victories, no matter how small, and looked forward to a future where respect and love would guide their lives. The entitled group's story was also a lesson in change. Not everyone in the group changed overnight, but the experience opened the door for growth. Some members chose to leave behind their negative behaviors and became active parts of the community, helping others, and spreading positive messages. This transformation showed that even those who make mistakes can find a better path if given the chance. The healing process was not always easy. There were moments of doubt, frustration, and lingering pain. But through patience, understanding, and commitment, John and the community found ways to move forward. They learned that healing is a journey, not a destination. The car itself became a powerful symbol. It was no longer just a vehicle but a reminder of the battle fought and the victory won. John took great care of it, sometimes showing it to visitors as a story of hope and strength. The car represented more than resilience. It stood for the power of justice, the importance of community, and the belief that kindness can overcome hate. As time went on, John and his neighbors kept building a better future. They stayed connected, looked out for one another, and worked together to make their town a place where everyone felt safe and respected. Their story spread beyond their small community, inspiring others to stand up against hate and support those who serve and protect. In the end, the journey from vandalism to justice and healing showed that, even in the darkest times, there is light. It proved that courage, kindness, and unity could overcome cruelty and hate. John's story became a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of a community standing together.